John Fredericks Radio Network. Joining us now, David Ray, spokesperson, FAIR, the Federation for American Immigration Reform. Dave, great to have you with us, man.
Hey, John, great to be with you again, buddy.
Hey, Dave, I just want you to break down the EO, the executive order the president signed earlier in the week. Basically, this is something that we have been calling for forever, to really curtail and get rid of these scam visas where you bring foreign workers in, which just lower wages for Americans and take jobs away. This is a tool of Goldman-Sacks and Wall Street to import cheap labor so they can drive their stock prices up on the backs of working Americans.
Well, absolutely, John. If you recall, the president did a temporary pause in immigration in April and exempted from that pause foreign guest workers. Now, this was under the premise that, we at that point had 20 million recently laid off Americans. And as things have progressively gotten worse, there was a clause in there where in that executive order in April where they promised to revisit the issue of guest workers. Since then, we're northwards of 30 million laid off Americans because of COVID-19, and much to the chagrin of Wall Street, and I'm sure much to the chagrin of many of his advisors, the president came through on his promise to form an immigration policy that was truly in the national interest, not in the special interest. And so this executive order bans the entry of foreign guest workers through the end of the year. This is incredibly welcome news to the 30 million plus Americans who've recently lost their jobs due to the COVID-19 crisis and the subsequent downsizing of the economy. I mean, you got to realize that these are jobs, some of the best jobs this nation has to offer, all the way down to, farm workers. This is the whole gamut of these jobs. It includes a lot of these H-1B guest worker visas where foreigners were actually being brought in and training their American replacements as they're being trained by their American replacements as the Americans were being fired. So this is very welcome news. It's going to give all those Americans who are losing hope of ever getting back into the job force some reason for optimism that they're going to be able to get back into the economy and not lose their homes and not lose their life savings. And so, you talk about immigration in the national interest. This is exactly what it looks like, John.
Dave, finally, all I can say is, look, I had Steve Bannon on the other day, and I'm ringing the alarm bells because right now, if the election were held today, the president would lose, he would get blown out, Biden would be president, and they take the Senate with him. And it's not fake polls, okay? It's real. We're losing. And the only way to turn this is what Bannon said, action, action, action. Now, for 3 years, the president has been snookered by the special interest, Goldman Sachs, where you can basically, Dave, all evil in America, you can trace it right back to its embryo. It always goes back to Goldman Sachs. That's all the evil is there. The lobbyist, the money, the cheap labor that goes on with Wall Street and Silicon Valley, importing these visas that we've been railing against, Dave, you and I, and my good friend Bob Dane, for years, okay? Finally, the president takes a stand and says, I've had enough. I'm just getting rid of them. Much to the chagrin of Jared Kushner, many of his advisors, half the people in the RNC, Wall Street donors, and everything. He finally said, I had enough. The only way you turn this, Dave, is by action, is by doing things that actually create jobs and matter to people. And I think this is a step in the huge direction. And what I'm hoping is there's no going back now. He finally did it and said, I had enough, right?
Well, a lot of folks who listened in on the Democratic debates for president were shocked when they heard Democrats coming out and talking about the idea of an open border. Now, to be fair, I do not think Joe Biden was one of those people, but a lot of Democrats did talk about decriminalizing illegal immigration, promoting sanctuary cities, et cetera. What a lot of people don't realize is that there are people with those kooky ideas inside the Republican Party as well. In fact, John, about 25 years ago, it probably was, the Wall Street Journal, which is the Bible of Wall Street, the Bible of the Goldman Sachs folks of the world, they came out with an editorial calling for a 5-word constitutional amendment. There shall be open borders. So don't be surprised when you hear about Republicans pressing for more access to cheap labor. This is the way American businesses will never have enough cheap, docile labor. But what we need is an administration that protects the best interest of the American worker, and I think that's what President Trump demonstrated right here.
When he first got elected, I thought he was going to do this. He didn't do it. He had so much pressure from these lobbyists and donors and Goldman Sachs not to do this, David, as you know, is tremendous inertia. You're right. I mean, he's fighting the open borders crowd, both sides of it. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. This is why I hate the Republican Party. I always have, because they've always been the party of open borders, open trade, slave labor, Wall Street, Goldman Sachs, the whole bit. Finally, this president has stood up to it. When we talk about bringing our supply chains back to China, right, people are starting to get their arms around this now and saying, yeah, you know what, the fact that our drugs are supplied there and the fact that our key manufacturing, that's not a good idea. You know, if something happens, it ought to be here. Well, you know what the genesis of that was, Dave? You know why all that stuff was being manufactured in China? Cheap labor, right? That's why all the companies went there with the cheap labor, got the goods here, dumped them on our shores, put U.S. Steel out of business, U.S. aluminum companies out of business, Canada put lumber companies out of business, they put furniture companies out of business. You know, when I grew up here and I first came to the South, North Carolina had all of these mills. They had all of these furniture stores, right? All gone. I mean, furniture manufacturers, all gone to China, every single one of them, Dave. You know what? Right. I've had enough. Now, finally, this president stands up. All right, tell me about DACA.
Well, DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, was a policy that was put forth in 2012 by President Obama. We at the second it came out, we said that it was an illegal executive power grab, that only Congress can change the status of large numbers of immigrants from illegal to legal. What DACA did is basically grant quasi-legal status to about 1.8 million illegal aliens, allowing them to be deferred from deportation, which means they cannot be removed, although they're here illegally, and also granted them work visas. And President Obama said on more than 20 occasions that he's the president, not the emperor, and that's why he couldn't give legal status to illegal immigrants. And then he went ahead and wrote the DACA memo, and boom, we have an amnesty. So this amnesty was challenged in the Supreme Court by the Trump administration, and it went to the Supreme Court recently, and it was quite a disappointment. The Supreme Court, instead of ruling really on the overall legality of DACA and whether or not a president could actually do this in the first place, they instead took a very narrow path and ruled on the way that the Trump administration attempted to close it down. So they didn't rule that what Obama did was legal, but they said the steps the Trump administration took to close down this illegal alien amnesty were wrong. And so we are back to, the starting point on DACA. You've got 1.8 million illegal aliens. The Democrats like referring to them as kids. Let me remind your listeners that DACA people are mostly in their 20s and 30s. In fact, some of them are nearly 40. So these are not kids. These are adults. They're living here illegally. They do have a country where they are citizens of. It is not the United States. And they are taking jobs that could otherwise go to some of the tens of millions of unemployed Americans who are looking to break back into the job market.
So the president in his rally in Tulsa was saying that, it's just a matter of getting new paperwork in. What was he talking about?
Well, because what the Supreme Court said is that they didn't say you don't have a right to end this executive action by a former president. Just the way that you did it, the way you went about ending it was not by the books. And so it really wasn't a substantive, it wasn't a decision based on the legality. It was just you didn't close this down properly. dot your I's and cross your T's. So if they want to close down DACA, they have to go through a certain administrative procedure, and the court found that they failed to do that. This is obviously something that eventually will have to be decided by Congress. President Trump can't give legal status to these illegal immigrants any more than President Obama could. And so these folks who are here on DACA, on the DACA program, they are not going to be on a pathway to a green card. Only Congress can do that. So they are in a state of permanent limbo. Maybe the next administration will deal with this one way or the other, but it looks like we just kicked the can down the road at this point.
So when you say kick the can down the road, so what happens now? You got 1.8 million people. I mean, are they just granted amnesty now, or
no.
Do they vote in November, Dave Ray, from FAIR? What happens?
Their status has not changed. So these 1.8 million people remain illegal aliens who cannot be deported and who have work visas, and that's all they'll be. Only Congress can give them a green card, not the president. What DACA did was kept these folks from being deported. It didn't actually give them legal status.
Right.
And so the Trump administration can try again to close this program down, going by the outline that the Supreme Court gave them, or they can try to handle it politically. I mean, that's going to be a call on by the president. But, FAIR's position on amnesties has been crystal clear. Regardless of if it's a President Trump or it's a President Biden, we will say from the tallest mountain, illegal alien amnesties are bad public policy. It incentivizes illegal immigration. It slaps legal immigrants in the face, and it undermines the American dream for everyone. And so DACA is a bad idea. It shouldn't have been started in the first place. It needs to be closed down as soon as possible, and we need to encourage those who want to come here to play by the rules, to do it the right way, and to enter the American family through the front door, not the back door.
Is this going to be a campaign issue 2020, Dave Ray?
I do believe it will be, but it's interesting because the president has actually been very supportive and has said he wanted to find a solution for the DACA recipients. I think he was possibly closing the program down to force the Democrats to the bargaining table. But yeah, I mean, I think from all appearances, Biden is going to be very supportive of DACA, but I'm not quite sure where the president stands on that, if he wants it as a bargaining tool, or he's actually said, I really feel for these folks. They've been in this deferred status for quite some time. So we will have to see how this plays out and what suggestions come out of both candidates as they campaign in the future.
How do you think Biden's going to be positioned here? By the way, we're with Dave Ray, Senior Communications Director for FAIR, Federation for American Immigration Reform.
Well, John, first of all, we are a nonprofit charity. We cannot get into any campaigning. And so I need to be very careful what I say. But, I think the distinctions between the two candidates are going to have to come out in the debates. I think Vice President Biden at this point in the debates has largely kind of stayed in the mainstream, unlike most of his party, on the immigration issue. But we will have to see if he gets pulled further to the left, or if he can find his moorings and remain in the middle. Most of Americans don't want to reward illegal immigration. They want either the Zogby poll that came out last week that found that, by a 2-to-1 majority, Americans want immigration paused until we can get through the COVID-19 crisis and Americans can get back to work. So I don't know. I can't read the tea leaves for Vice President Biden, but they're going to have a chance to really define themselves and their differences if we ever get some dates for debates.
All right. Well, it's going to be interesting. I want to thank Dave Ray for being with us. Dave, always good to have you on. Have to have you more. Lots of news. But finally, the good news is, Dave, after all these years, the president, and he was the only one that could ever do it. It took him 3 years says no more of these scam visas, and that's really what they are. They drive down wages and take jobs away. They should only be granted when the shortage is there, not to drive down wages, which is their purpose, which has infuriated me, Dave, because the whole purpose behind a visa is we have a shortage of workers in this field. And so we don't have them.
Go to FAIR's website. We have testimonials from people who have been fired from their jobs. Told that they need to train, their Indian or Pakistani or what have you replacements in order to get their severance package. I mean, it happens to real people.
It happens all the time.
We're betraying our own people, and this needs to stop.
Yeah, it's all about Goldman-Sacks, Wall Street, cheap labor, bigger quarterly bonuses, and U.S. workers get screwed. And Dave, they've been doing it for 40 years, and both parties have scammed it. It's sick. Thank goodness, finally Trump said I had enough. John Fredericks Radio Network. Dave, thank you.
You bet, John. Take care, buddy.
All right.